What's going on, Spittin Chiclets fans? Biz here. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the ECHL Player Relief Fund interview series. And this one is brought to you by Can-I Brands, who is supporting your everyday health and wellness through their CBD products. Not only does Can-I Brands make product that personally helped me, but they have kindly donated $10,000 to the ECHL Player Relief Fund and will also be donating 10% of all sales through our channels to the ECHL Player Relief Fund using the BIZ30 promo code. That gives you a 30% discount on products across the entire website. And if you want to put more money in your pocket, head to canibrands.com and check out the Champions program under the Ambassadors tab. We know times are not easy right now, so we're trying to give you guys as much content as we can. So we hope you enjoy this interview. And please, stay safe. And once again, thank you to Can-I Brands.
Well, our next guest has been one of the faces of Canada for about 35 years now, most famously, of course, on Hockey Night in Canada every Saturday during the season. He's won numerous awards for his work. He's done some little bit of reffing back in the day, I understand, as well. It's an honor for me to have you on as a journalist, a major guy I looked up to. Ron MacLean, welcome to the Spittin Chiclets podcast.
It's a pleasure, Admiral. And Paul, I owe Paul for what he did for me in Welland for a show we do up in Canada called Rogers Hometown Hockey, and his mom and dad, Yolanda and Cam, were the honorary social conveners of our show, and so it's great to do it with you, Biz.
How
and
do
Ryan.
you remember all these names?
Well,
like you're just like
I think you're born with that. Some people just remember names.
Yeah, Gretzky, right? We were just talking before we started about Wayne and his. He can recall all of the goals, all 894. He can give you specifics. It's funny. I did the All-Star game here in 1988, so I was 27. You were 2. You were 2 years old, Paul. And I did the All-Star game in St. Louis, and I was very proud of an interview I did with the legendary Glenn Hall. And I asked our team to pull it for last year's Stanley Cup, and I looked at it and it was god-awful. I was so just a Bambi, right? And Glenn was gracious and great, but it wasn't much. There was no enlightenment out of the interview.
Kind of like how we're going to be looking at this in 25 years.
Yeah. But that was Wayne. Wayne got a goal. They were up 2-1. His team was the Whales. They used to call the East. They were up 2-1 after 20 minutes because it was a big showdown. Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky. And as Wayne said, 20 years earlier, I went to the All-Star game, Joe Louis Arena, Detroit, and I had fire in my eyes. I was going to show Mike Bossy and Guy Lafleur that I was here to play and that I belonged. And he said, and I know Mario's coming at me tonight. and Mario did. He ended up with 3-3.
So saying that were All-Star games a little bit more intense back then?
Well, in fact, Gordie Howe, we were also talking about him off the air. Gordie played his first All-Star in 1948, the year that Bobby Orr was born, and he fought in that game. And then Bobby's first game was 68. Bobby Orr's first All-Star game was 68. Gordie Howe played in that one, too, and he fought Mike Walton. And then he played in the 1980 All-Star game with Wayne Gretzky. That was his first, Gordie Howe did. And Bobby Orr was 2 years retired. So that's, but Gordie kind of represented the intensity of it. Orr, for sure, famously blocked a shot, a Bobby Hull blast to preserve a victory, and I think it was 72. It was really, this 88 game. I mean, Wayne had a lot going on. He had proposed to Janet Jones, right? So the royal wedding was about to happen up in Edmonton, and that was one of the storylines. And then the intensity behind this, like when Connor McDavid rolled into Toronto recently, and he scored a great goal. Obviously, Morgan Riley undressed, and then he put his number one in the air to kind of let T.O. no, let's not have any discussion of Austin Matthews or anybody else. I'm your man now. And so with Sid and him, let's say, it would be neat to see showdowns, but it's just a different time.
And you joke about the wedding being the royal wedding for Wayne. He's Canadian royalty, and I mean, you're not going to like this. I put you and Don in that class because you were the face of Hockey Night in Canada for all of these years. We grew up to you guys. I know everybody was very disappointed in how it ended, no matter what side you lied on it. But you mentioned early on how you were the Bambi. Were you really nervous getting into this industry?
Oh, Paul, I was horrified. I remember I kind of fell into it. I was in Calgary working the Calgary Flames games, and Dave Hodge had accepted a job. He was my predecessor as the principal host on Hockey Night in Canada, fantastic broadcaster. But Dave had received a job offer from CKNW in Vancouver. So he moved to Vancouver, and he would fly in and do Hockey Night in Canada in Toronto. But he said if there's Canucks home dates, I wouldn't mind working in Vancouver. So they needed a guy to do about 11 Hockey Night in Canadas. And the boss that was connected to my work in Calgary said, phone Don Wallace, executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, put your name in the hat, and they like to groom somebody. So you're 26 might be just ideal. And I got the gig, and I was such a deer in headlights. I've told you, Paul, I used to have like really bad anxiety when I was young. I'd get these panic attacks and the whole mess of anxiety. And I will say Grapes was great. Like he kind of sheltered me from a lot of bad moments. I remember doing the first ever Coach's Corner, and I was trying to keep my eyes fixed on Don Cherry's because the producer said, Ron, we like your work, but when you're interviewing guests, your eyes have a tendency to wander up and down the guest, and it's a little disconcerting to some of the viewers.
You're licking your lips.
Yeah, I was mortified. I had this bad affectation, right? So I thought, whatever you do, stupid, rivet your eyes on cherries and don't let them budge. Which is hard to do when you make eye contact.
So weird.
It's awkward, and I got a tear developed on my very first Coach's Corner. A tear started streaming down my left cheek. Now, the camera's here, so the viewer didn't see it, but Don's looking at me thinking, "Good God, is this guy going to fall every time I say I like fighting?" Anyway, we got through it, and that was 1986, and as you say, 34 great years together, and a crazy. We were kind of an arranged marriage. Back then, because of Dave's decision to go to Vancouver, and then we were kind of an arranged divorce because the way things shook down. And you were right there. You saw firsthand what a clumsy, crazy time.
Since we're kind of already talking about it, I guess maybe some people who are more Cherry fans were a little upset, considering that they thought that many times in your career that he had went to bat for you, which I'm sure he did.
Yes, he did. Yeah, both of us went to bat for one another, and in this case, honestly, all I can say to that is because it is a hard thing to feel like when you're a player. You fought how many fights on behalf of a teammate, and when I always kind of likened Don and me to two American Hockey League defense partners. We weren't quite right. We weren't quite the language wasn't perfect. Our attempts to teach honor and everything was like Don Quixote. It was always a farce. him and Sancho Panza. But we were consistently there with me, the left wing pinko communist, and Don, the right wing, whatever he is. It was good to see that reflection of two guys so different that could work together, and then I felt like we were kind of in a foxhole. And then on this crazy event, which was just Don projecting a behavior on people because of where they come from, and got it wrong, but chose his decision was not to say sorry and do whatever. You'd have to ask Don what he said. They made it impossible, which I can't believe they would make it impossible for Don. But anyway, he just decided what he decided, and I had no control, right? I woke up after a night at the Trappers in Welland.
Well, he was in Welland when this all went down.
Yeah, doing the hometown hockey.
And it was hard for me to watch, a Canadian icon and what you guys had done for hockey collectively. Yeah. It was hard to watch you go through that, and I'm sure it was just as hard for Don because you were between a rock and a hard place where this is your livelihood, and everyone can tell this means a lot to you doing this job.
Right.
And, having to come on the next day and already have something written or to say something, people felt like you threw him under the bus when I didn't look at it that way, and I knew how bent out of shape you were about it, and it was sad.
It was important to get what I really hated about it all was that, as you know, we were shooting at your mom and dad's, and then we were shooting we did a meet and greet, a corporate event, and then we did stuff for the Canada Winter
Games.
Day. It was just like nonstop while I was on the phone. Racing badly, and I remember the one sort of request from Rogers was, when you apologize, Ron, try not to cushion it with Don's a great guy, and try not to just try to be unequivocal and clear about what you're trying to say. And I was really scrambling to do that, so I did my quick apology, which I wanted to do because I felt bad, Ryan, that we had it was an inadvertent mistake, but it was a mistake, and it's just one of those things that in my little world, Don knows my politics, my ethics. I am kind of that do-gooder that feels strongly about stuff like that. So I was upset that it kind of went sideways on us, and I wanted to apologize, and I kind of thought Don would. So I never really dreamt that it would get so wild so fast, and that's the power of that quick, right? And there's no real circling back, so it was just out of our control, but like I said, 34 great years, and hopefully Paul was asking, how are you doing with Don now? And I email over there, and I wonder if he even sees the emails because Don's not the most tech savvy guy. Anyway, that'll come. That'll be the last.
Time heals.
Right. We'll figure that part out because I can't imagine that he doesn't still take a shine to all we've been through together. Like, we've been through some crazy moments together, and as far as Don would have kept his job if he wanted to keep his job. So the idea that I threw the bus, or ran the bus over him That's just not fair. But I understand it.
Yeah.
I totally understand why it feels that way. What I think is really fascinating, there's so many elements to this, but when you, as I did, sort of talk about an aspirational choice, I had to pick what I felt right over friendship, and that just doesn't appeal to the heart.
Right.
People want loyalty. People want friends for life. They don't
Right.
want to hear that somebody's picking the intellect. It's kind of an intellect decision, which has no appeal, especially in our business. Our business is all about heart.
But it's not always black or white.
No, you don't want your kids to just go along and do the wrong thing,
Yeah,
right?
your best friend, he's your best friend, but this is an example. He does something awful. It's like loyalty only goes so far. And
That's
so I
right.
think you make sense. What I was going to say about the entire thing is, like, Biz has mentioned it before. Playing wise, that's why there's the cool off period before the media come in. But when stories break like this story was so big. It's like everyone wants an answer right away. It's
Right.
like, just if you didn't rush people into giving the immediate reaction, it's like things would be said different. But part of the rush makes it hard. But I mean, it was a crazy time. I mean, I know that in the end, I think my opinion is, when the dust settles, it'll be about the memories, and in years
For
down
sure.
the line, and even the fans will be like,
Yeah.
those coaches' corners, those Hockey Night in Canada, Saturday night, living on two guys who had this relationship where they were friends, but also would argue. In the end, that'll be what's remembered.
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. I
hope you know that.
Yeah, I feel that. Yeah,
Yeah, good.
I just know because I know what we went through.
Yeah.
I know, like I said, 2 American hockey together. I remember us looking for beer in Pennsylvania. It's hard to find beer in Pennsylvania, right? So we were like 2 desperate souls wandering around the south side of Pitt looking for a beer distributor. And I thought to myself, well, that reminds me of what it must be like for the 2 guys that roll off the bus in the AHL hoping to find beer.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why you use the AHL defenseman term. Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I was just going to ask a question about this industry, which is you've been a part of it for so long, but Biz said, were you nervous at the beginning? My thing has been interviewing can be so tough, and I imagine now you've become so accustomed, but even at times, isn't it wild how you do an interview and things aren't buzzing? And then when you're on national TV, like, how do you approach when you're not necessarily vibing with a guy?
Well, first of all, you got 11 interviews here at All-Star Weekend. It's impossible. Like, I think for players, and I refereed, and certainly in broadcasting, concentration's everything. And it's really hard to keep your concentration through 11 interviews. If you're overworked and underprepared, it's going to show. So that's kind of the secret, is to be as prepared as you can be, because on those days you're not clicking.
You need to have stuff to ask.
That might get you through. But on the days you're clicking, which is a lot of it's trust, right? If you can, I just think about how the St. Louis Blues won this Stanley Cup and went through so many, being last, in January 2nd, to being in trouble against Dallas in double overtime, to having the crazy gloved pass goal put them behind in a series, to everything, losing the 6th game here when they should have won. But somehow they kept their cool, and it's,
Similar.
you've been through, yeah, for sure.
Well, we
like
can cut stuff. You're live.
Even with the grapes ordeal, and I'll leave this, but I kept saying it wasn't beyond my experience. It was beyond my education to figure out how the hell to say something that wouldn't incite a riot one way or the other. Like, everything felt divisive. Everything felt self-serving. Nothing I could come up with felt particularly helpful, and that was my education maybe letting me down. My experience was just do the job, and let them, howl. You can't worry about that.
How did you get into officiating?
I was starting my radio career, Biz, and a friend of mine who had gotten me into broadcasting, I had no aim to go into that. A guy was working as an operator at CKRD in Red Deer. Bernie Roth was his name. And Bernie said he was just going to start refereeing because they might give him some microphone moments, and he doesn't want to have a speech impediment from getting his teeth knocked in. So he said, I'm going to switch from playing. We were junior age. I'm going to switch from playing to refereeing. It's a little safer. And I thought, well, that's a good idea, because he got me involved at the radio station to come in and work pushing buttons part-time. And then eventually I followed his lead into refereeing. And I remember, too, doing that and just the swirl of a game. He was probably novice or peewee, just a little hockey, but it still felt overwhelming. I'd played all my life, but it was hard to track, 10 players instead of just follow the puck. But I really enjoyed it. And I always felt fantastic support for media, because in both instances, refereeing and in our job here, you want to let your guest be the star. And it's not us against them. It's you're there to facilitate. And I refereed with this whole feeling of, okay, how are they going? Are they starting to feel unsafe out there? Are they starting to lose their marbles? Then I need to step it up a bit. Otherwise, they seem to have it under control.
So I don't even know if you know this, but I played in the game, the NHL preseason game. You reffed it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Of course you remember this.
14 days ago, 14 years ago from now, 2006, we played Buffalo in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And before the game, somebody said, Ron MacLean's ref. And I was like, Hockey Night in Canada, Ron MacLean?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, he's a referee as well. So I remember you called the penalty late at some point in the game. But
LeClaire, chintzy trip. Terrible.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
You had
yeah.
to send somebody to the box.
I was trying to play along, right? There was a new standard. The year before, we had 18,000 power plays, right?
Yeah.
And I wasn't happy
Yeah.
about it. I felt that we'd gone too far. Like all these ethical agendas, when the pendulum swings, it comes crashing through, right? So we had that 05-06 season where Carolina and Edmonton played in the final, and it was just power play after power play, and I felt it was too much. But anyway, so to try and make peace with the NHL, I agreed to come and referee, and I agreed to call one of their chintzy hooks, and I felt
the fuck out of here.
I
So
felt
that's why
so
you called it.
I felt so bad. Leclerc, Recchi was after me, Gonchar was after me, Brooks Orpik was after me. There was a lot of, but I loved that. I was kind of used to it with grapes, so I'd been called a lot of things.
What
Over my
were
reffing
some
career.
other silly things that you guys had to go through? And one other question before you answer that one: how did it all go down? Would he just show up and the main topics would be listed out?
Oh, no.
Or he would go over everything?
That's a great question.
No, he works at it like endlessly. We always talked on the regular season Saturdays. I would phone over at 9:30, and every Saturday morning at 9:30 he would pick up the phone and say, "Don's Bicycle Shop, Big Wheel Don talking." That was like our little ritual, right, for 30 odd years. I would phone, and I'd sort of have a list of things that I had noticed that week. Don would certainly have had a list of things that he had noticed that week. And Kathy Broderick, a producer at Hockey Night in Canada, was really good at filing away things that might appeal to Don and his sensibilities, because that's part of it, right? We, especially in the early going, guy could go end to end and undress 15 people 6 times, but if he wore a visor, he wasn't getting on coach's corner. So that's one of my favorite moments. We were in Pittsburgh doing a Stanley Cup. I don't know if you were just skating, Ryan, or what, or Paul. It was 09. So we're in the Sheraton on the island. What's that? I don't know what it's called, but so we're there watching a baseball game. It's the off night between Stanley Cup games, and we're watching baseball. And a catcher is talking about how he had a really bad April, and he was upset that his hands were frozen and the bat vibrated, and all the guys from Puerto Rico and the Dominican who wore batting gloves were tearing it up, and he just was going to have to try this because his career is going down the tank if he doesn't figure out how to hit in April and early May. So he gets up there with his batting gloves on, and the opposing team catcher, now Don and I are like this. There's a table between us with peanuts and popcorn and beer in the garbage can in front of us, and we're watching the baseball game, and this catcher's explaining how he's going to wear batting gloves for the first time hitting a ball. And as he gets ready to face the first pitch, the catcher of the opposing team down below says, "I thought you were one of us." And Grapes spits his beer out, and he fires his hand over. It just about caves in 6 of my ribs. He says, You see, I know what I'm talking about. You see what a suck? He's become a suck, and everybody knows it." And, that's what it was like watching TV with Don, right? Same with Trump, right? We would have to, in the more recent Stanley Cups, whether it was in Nashville or in Vegas, I would want to go back and watch the NHL Network or highlights and just kind of figure out what did really happen in the game, because somehow you're at them, but you don't catch everything, right?
Yep.
You know how that feels. So I like to go back and watch the highlights. Not Don. He's got to have Fox News on, and he wants to see Trump's speech for the 3rd time, and then Grapes will start hitting me again, like, you see, now watch this. This is good. This is really good. Watch where he's going to go off prompter here. He's going to go off. He knows there's union guys over in the corner. He's going to get a rise out of them. So he's going to go over here. He's going to go off. Watch this. This is really good. Imagine, he says, he's in his 70s. Is that great energy or what? And that's what we would do, like over our beer in the Stanley Cup.
You're like you're like on your phone. You're like, again,
Yeah,
Jesus.
make it a double.
Yeah, I tell you.
But I mean, we joke about the Trump stuff and how he's maybe a little bit more right wing than us.
Yeah. What's wrong with that? You're allowed to be.
Yeah, but
you can be both.
But there's also so much good that he did as well.
Oh.
Like with the military
Yes.
and everything. And I mean, do you want to just touch on some
Well,
stuff?
he reminds me of just the way Berube, took over the Blues and brought that kind of sensibility to a dressing room. He's even keeled in his own. Well, like Don wasn't, I don't think. When he coached, Don could get pretty, hot and bothered. But he still, Don, like Berube, has a perspective that is, Berube fought as a 16-year-old in a tough man competition in Williams Lake, BC, and he survived it. And Don had to go through all that, and so he had a carnal, primal, whatever it is, knowledge of courage. And we kind of needed someone to teach us that, right? It's all well and good to come at it with my, the land of Billiken. Here in St. Louis, the university mascot is the Billiken, which is the god of how things ought to be. And that's what Don always say. Oh, you live in the world of Billiken, Ron. You're in, rose-colored glasses. So we wanted, and right now, without a Don, let's say, you need a train wreck. You need that narrative tension, and you also need somebody that's got a good grasp of the trench. And he was really good. And then, as you say, Paul, he did that for the military. I hate to say it, but our military, he did. And that was what was so hard about the night that everything fell apart. We had just done 2 tributes to 2 young boys who had died. One from Welland had died of mental illness that resulted in suicide. He had just said that, and he was on his way to the Vimy Ridge poppy thing, which is beautiful, and in the middle of it got off the rails there. And what are you going to do? You can't knock this guy. He's doing God's work
in between
here.
2.
Yeah, he's doing incredibly
stories.
great things for those families of the fallen young boys, and so it's just one of those. He was always extremely conscientious about the work. He was born to it. He read on the flights. All he read were the bios of divas and movie stars. He was really fascinated with television. In his days in the American Hockey League, the bus would pull into town, and he would get off the bus and he'd say to his teammates, "We're going to turn on the TV, and if I can't name every actor and actress in whatever's on the TV, I'll buy. But if I can name every actress and actor on the TV when we move into the hotel, then you guys have to buy me one."
So he's like a gossip, a celebrity gossip.
He was
hound,
amazing Hollywood fan, right? Just amazing how, and that's why the outfits and that's why the lighting. He would spend. We would get into, I would be so excited, especially in my young career. I'd be so excited. It's Game 7, the New York Rangers and the Vancouver Canucks. This is big, we got East
You're
Coast,
on the ice,
West
right?
Coast. We do the opening and that, and then I want to watch the first period, and I'm like a hawk. I want to watch. Don's not even looking at the game. He's in there farting with the lights and getting the chairs the right height so that he looks powerful, and he's just a TV.
He's an
wizard.
entertainer.
Yeah. He's an entertainer. And
Don Bissonnette.
It was.
Yeah. Well, I had him in Boston. He was the very first coach I really remember. And that iconic thing on the bench, like I think it was in Montreal, he's all the dramatics he throws out that used to play leading to his clips.
Well, I remember doing the All-Star game in Boston in 96, maybe 95. I think it was 96.
I think it was 96 because they just opened the building.
Right. So Harry Sinden comes in, and Harry was mad at Don because Don had ripped Steve Casper was coaching the Bruins, and he had benched Kevin Stevens and Cam Neely in Toronto.
Yep.
And Don was livid, right? So he carved, he didn't like Casper anyway. So he carved Casper, and Harry Sinnen, the GM of the Bruins, comes in to talk to me. Like, Don's he never does All-Stars, right? So I'm there alone, and in comes Harry, and he says, that was despicable what you guys did. You guys, right? Guilt by association. I'm just sitting there.
I didn't even say anything.
But yeah. But anyway, I understand. He says that, and he says, and you're even worse for going along with it. And I said, Harry, Don, he loves Neely, and he just didn't want him left, and embarrassed on Hockey Night in Canada. He's not going to leave a guy in the middle of the field, behind. Ironic, the conversation I was having with Harry, and Harry suddenly did like a 180. He says, I know him. He says, I always wish I was never able to get back in a coach what Don had. I wish I could find that, whatever it is he has.
The fire.
I've never had it, and there's been a lot of good coaches, and the guys that have borrowed things like Milbury, Brian Sutter, I don't know about Mike Sullivan, but a little bit.
Pat Burns.
Tortorella for sure. It wasn't a Bruin, but yeah. Those Burns for sure.
Mm-hmm.
like Hockey Night in Canada every Saturday night, it's so big. But then you took over a long time ago as running the Olympics, and then it's not just hockey fans. Like, did you feel a different pressure that went with that? And more than anything, you must have some special memories from 2010. It hurt me,
yes,
but to get gold in Van, you must.
Well, that's Whit reminding you that he was in the game.
I know it's big. We were also.
I'll tell anyone, a Starbucks barista hears I played in the Olympics.
Well, so was I, right? I was home in my Oakville residence watching it because CTV, the Canadian network that carried the games, was not us.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't go. I was home watching, of course. And
you're just a fan.
When that goal, when the U.S. ties it, a 2-0 lead squandered, especially to see Shea Weber and Niedermeyer, I think were the two for the Canadian defense. I think those two were on the ice. We got all twisted up. I say we, but we got all messed up trying to nurse that thing home. And I thought, how in the world is Canada going to get itself together? But in the overtime, as they all said, they got an intermission to kind of reboot, and there was a lot of veteran guys who, again, wasn't beneath their.
I think it was Niedermeyer who was like, "Boys, we're fine."
Yes.
With one bead of sweat right in the middle of his chest, as Whit describes it, where he'd already played 25 minutes, but he wasn't sweating.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember Gretzky came in Torino in 2006. So after Canada lost in the quarterfinal to Russia, Ovechkin beat Brodeur and they won easily. Canada was never in those Olympics for whatever reason. And Gretzky came into a little bar in Torino, Italy after the game. Him and Steve Tambellini and Kevin Lowe and Walter Gretzky and Bob Nicholson and the whole entourage of Canada. And we're having beers that are this big. And Wayne said, Niedermeyer killed us. He said, not having Scott Niedermeyer killed us. Scott had a bad knee and couldn't play. So they went with 7D, and they were trying Brian McCabe on both sides, and they brought Jovo in, and they just never found a game. Yeah. They just never found it. And he said that guy is the guy that stirs the drink.
Ron, I want to ask, obviously you're a human, so some days you're going to have off days. When you have those type of days, how do you get to the level you need to be at to go on TV, like emotionally or enthusiasm-wise?
I think it's
rock star status.
Well, I'm a humble. I try to be humble, and when you say that, of course, it sounds insincere or disingenuous. But I love the guest be the star mantra, and I kind of revert to, why are you here? You're not here for you. You're here for that viewer that wants to be entertained and wants to laugh and wants to know something. So I just kind of revert to what is the actual thing that you're doing and why do you love that? It's not about you. So that gets me that was how I got out of my anxiety. Like when I was suffering in my early career, a lot of, how do I appear? How am I sounding? How intelligent? And am I winning this? And, one of the great things, Admiral, is when you're in a, we'll start to armor up when we're afraid. We'll start to put on all kinds of disguises, and we'll start to say things that aren't really us because we're scared. Mm-hmm. And that experience is the only thing that teaches you how to be unafraid. And I learned, eventually refereeing was a great help, because I was trying my damnedest and it just got away on me. I got it wrong, and I understood it wasn't because of a lack of effort or a lack of ability. It's just the way it goes, right? And so I a lot of lessons from reffing. And then when you're in our vocation, and I think it applies to all life, but it's not a far movement from I'm not worthy to I'm better than you. Mm-hmm. And you got to watch those both.
Yeah, right.
That's for me, that's the great art, is to just sort of, and that only comes from thinking of the other. The greatest wisdom of all is to just concentrate on the other person and not yourself.
Well, I was going to ask, so what are some of your better memories of doing Hockey Night in Canada? Are there some, tee us up with some ones that you always tell?
Well, I mean, for me, one of the funny ones is how Bettman and I kind of fell apart. Was we were in, this gives you an idea of how Cherry operates, which is great. So we are doing the 99 Stanley Cup playoffs, and we do Toronto-Buffalo on the eastern side in the conference final. It goes 5 games. Buffalo wins going away. Hasek comes back after Roley plays the first game, and they win easy. We're sitting at home for a Saturday night.
Incredible.
And the phone rings. Ron, looks like Avalanche and Dallas are going to a 7th game in Dallas. We need you and Don to go down for a coach's corner, and you'll host the pregame show. So I phone Grapes. Grapes, we've got to fly down to Dallas Reunion Arena. We're going to host the 7th game. All right. So we go down, and he goes right to the hotel, pick out a tie for his green suit. He had the craziest green suit, lime green. I go right to the rink, and there's a host, Scott Russell of CBC, gives me this device called a Humidex, and he said the big storyline, Ron, is the humidity. The temperature outside Reunion Arena on the tarmac in this late 7th game in the 3rd round was like 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And they were terrified that the heat and the humidity was going to kill the ice in this old rink. So Dan Craig, the expert ice maker, had been flown in, and he put ventilation ducts in the ceilings. They had all the doors of the arena 4 inches ajar for whatever reason. They cooled the ice an extra 2 degrees. They had gone to all these lengths to try, and he said, and Ron, this Humidex, hold it up, because when you press the red button, if the relative humidity is 95% or higher, that's a problem. They don't think they'll be able to keep the ice for 60 minutes. So I go on the air. Good evening. Welcome to the 7th game. High drama here in Dallas. And one of the storylines we're tracking is the heat and the humidity. And actually, the humidity is the bigger issue. So I have a device here called a Humidex. I'll just indicate if it's 95 to 100, we're in trouble. Bing. It's 99%, the relative humidity. So Dan Craig has done all this, but we're quite concerned we're quite concerned. So now here's a feature on the late Rocket Richard. As soon as I threw to the Rocket Richard feature, Gary Bettman comes roaring in. We're in a Zamboni at the corner of the Reunion Arena. Bettman comes roaring at me. Ron, why do you have to be so negative? And I had just got off a plane, right? I thought I was going to have a weekend off. I had just flown into Dallas, and when I thought about it, he's right. It was kind of negative. I just did what I was told, right? We were supposed to talk about the ice being a storyline, but it was kind of negative. Anyway, nothing I could do about it. It's done. And Bettman and I, like two bantam roosters, argue a little bit more. If it wasn't June 3rd, we wouldn't have to worry about the ice, would we? And so forth. So that's that. And then I go back to this little dressing room that we're going to use for the coach's corner. And Don is sitting there with Alan Clark, a boss at CBC at the time. And I said, Bettman wasn't too happy with me talking about the ice conditions. And Don says, oh, is that right? He said, would you like a coffee? We got fresh coffee here. So he goes and grabs me a coffee, and that's that. We don't talk about that anymore. And the first period happens, and we get on the air, and Don says, hold it. Hold it.
Content.
Little something here before we get rolling. This guy kills me. You wise guy. Hey, you know everything. Oh, yeah, Ron MacLean from Red River, expert, weatherman. Oh, yeah, here he is. He's going to tell you don't know a lot, Ron. Let me just explain what you don't know. You don't know that they just come out of Denver the other night. That was their 350th sellout in a row. I made hockey in Denver, of course. But anyway, that's 350 straight sellouts. I bet you didn't know that, did you? And I bet you didn't know this either. I bet you didn't know that in Texas, they have more professional hockey teams per capita in the state of Texas than anywhere in the world. Did you know that? No, you didn't know that, wise guy, did you? And you didn't know that the ratings on ESPN now are through the roof. They said the other rating the other night, 16-2 or something, is the highest rating they've ever had for a Stanley Cup playoff. You didn't know that, did you? No. Ron MacLean, weatherman from Red River, flies in. He's got the chance to host the 7th game of a game to go to the Stanley Cup. You got Mike Modano versus Joe Sakic. You got Eddie Belfour versus Patrick Roy. You got one game, winner take all, to go to the final. It's a Saturday night, long weekend in Canada. Everybody's in a good mood. Except you. Oh, no. I'm going to stand here with my little thermometer, and I'm going to explain that the ice might melt. Wasn't it great?
He was burying you.
He had me.
So that was the whole segment.
That was the whole segment. And then as soon as the coach's corner ended, studio door opens, in comes Bettman. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Don.
Oh, my God. That is so
I would
good.
fucking pay $1 million to see the video.
So there were
of that.
times you said, oh, man, he's not going to say anything to me like right now. He's going to wait till we get on camera.
And I loved it.
He's making a show of it.
If there was a secret to our relationship, is that I got a bigger kick out of me being,
Made
the
fun of
fall
by
guy.
it.
I
For
love
sure.
that.
Yeah, it was. I deserved it, right? Bettman was right. I was negative, but I hadn't thought that through, and like a lot of things.
I would imagine at that point in time that had already happened many a times. Are there any other situations where he was like, hey, man?
As players, you have to learn not to take the bait, right? That's the hardest thing, because someone's going to be mercilessly carving you and poking fun at you and teasing you and
Doing whatever they can.
Yeah, you just gotta soldier on. But it was a fun one, and we've had so many just great. I remember early in my career trying to watch this. Some of these stories are not going to work anymore, right? But I remember we were doing the 7th game of Calgary versus Vancouver '89. This is a long time ago. It was ancient history. I have to explain to kids.
I was 4 at that point,
Yeah,
Ron.
it's crazy. So Vancouver's giving the Flames all they can handle. Calgary was like 50 points ahead of them during the regular season, but it's gone down to the 7th game. And Cliff Fletcher, the GM of the Flames famously had pulled the bus over as it left the Pacific Coliseum in Vancouver after the 6-game defeat. He pulled the bus over and kicked everyone off but the players, and he, Cliff Fletcher, the GM, had a heart-to-heart with the team. And it was supposed to be the way they won, albeit in double overtime in the 7th game. So I said to Don, I said, we're just sitting having a sauna, at the Westin in Calgary, and we're going to go back up to the hotel room and drink a couple beers. And I said, you should say, can't you just picture it? Cliff Fletcher pulls the bus over, tells the driver he's got to get off, tells the coaching staff got to get off, trainers got to get off, any media that's on the board, get off. And then he's ready to talk to the team. And then he opens the door again and he says, all right, I'll have the Czech, the Russian, the Finnish, and the Swedish interpreters back on the bus. That's a funny Don. Now, that no longer is that acceptable, that story. I'm sorry to tell it now.
This will work for you, Don.
But 30 years ago, that was a Don type thing, right? So we get on the air, and I'm kind of excited at my own mischief that I've created, and I can't wait to see Don pull this off. He says, well, I heard the big thing is Fletcher had a meeting, eh? That's what I heard. Yeah, so he pulled the bus over as they left the rink in Vancouver the other night, right? Right? That's what they did, right? And I know he's lost it, right? He doesn't know where he's going now, and I can't chip in because I can't. There can be only one bigot on this show. So I said, well, he probably had to kick off. Yes, I know he had to kick the coaching staff off. Of course, I'm the one telling the story here. What are you, stupid? And again, I shouldn't laugh at myself, but how could you not, right? That was
hilarious.
So funny. And yeah, those were the days. I mean, I look back, my book cornered. It's like... if you ever revisit some of the things we did, how we made it 34 years is a miracle.
Was he like that right off the hop?
Yes. Well, no, as I say, Paul, he was generous to me when I started because I was scared, and he liked me. Don is one of those first blush. He'll read you, and if he thinks you're looking through him with evil in your thoughts, that's it. You're off the list for good. He told it. Here's a good story. When he wanted to kind of explain to me what he's like, we were at the Meridian in Montreal, so this is the 86-87 season, my first year. And I was getting a little bit, wise-ass with my puns at the end or whatever I was trying to do to... Because, Grapes kind of goes the 6 minutes, and then I tried to deflect.
You tried to get a little time.
Well, more to just assuage the...
Well, and sometimes push back on him
a little bit, right.
Yeah.
And if sometimes just with levity to kind of establish, okay, there's always two sides to every story. But anyway... We're sitting at a bar at the Meridian Hotel Montreal, and he told the story of his brother Richard was a good ball player. So was Don, and his father was a great ball player. So they're at a midget baseball game in Kingston, Ontario, where the Cherries grew up. And Richard is in the game. Don Cherry and his father Dell are sitting in the first base bleacher. And the home plate umpire comes over and says, hey, Dell, the guy that was supposed to umpire at second base can't make it. Do you mind if Don umpires at second base? And Dell said, no, of course, Don will get out there. And Don says, Dad, I don't know anything about umpiring. He said, oh, for God's sakes, it's second base. The ball's ahead of the runner. He's out. Get out there. And so Don goes out to umpire at second base, and in the very first inning, makes a ruling in favor of his brother Richard's team. Well, the opposing manager comes flying out of the dugout and kicks dirt on him and, does the whole Earl Weaver, and Don doesn't know what to do, doesn't know how to kick a coach out. And he's kind of hot about it. And the game ends, and Don's still mad at this guy, made a fool of him. And so he goes over by that visiting dugout on the third base side, and the guy pops up out of the dugout, and Don just kind of leans into him enough that he loses his footing, falls back into the dugout, cracks his head on the bench, and is out. And Don thinks, well, I didn't mean to do quite all that, but good. I'm glad, And so he said, now I'm walking home with my father and brother, and they're ahead of me talking about the ball game, and I'm in behind. I got a stick in my hand, and I'm going along these picket fences, and all of a sudden this car pulls up, and it's a big car with 4 guys, including that manager from the other team. And they get out, and it looks like Kingston, 1950s. We got ourselves a fight here. So the manager says to Don, I just want to say something. I no hard feelings about that little thing at the end. That was just me losing my footing. And you were good enough to help us out umpiring at second base. You did a good job. You were right on that call about your brother at second, so don't worry about it. Put her here. And they shook hands, and they left. And Don's father turned to him, and he says, Donald, if you ever shake the hand of a man who's crossed you again, you'll not live under my roof. And that was, Don telling me, and now here we are. But Don saying, once you've crossed,
you're dead to me.
Those are his codes. Right?
So does that concern you about the situation?
Well, of course. But except Paul, we were 34 years. I know deep down, he knows I was in a jam or a pickle, and. Yeah, well, I'm not worried.
He's stubborn.
But
I'll
wear him out.
If it came,
I'll smother him somewhere. I'll go over to the house with. He likes Busch Light. I'll bring him some.
Oh,
What
God
about
bless
what,
him.
Oh, this
Brian
is a
Sutter-
Bud Light podcast. Maybe we can help you.
Okay,
Maybe we
Bud
can
Light.
give you some pink
Hey,
to send over too.
And
when the European stuff started, he was just so hard on European players who have proven that they play so hard themselves.
right.
It's like, would he behind the scenes at least admit the guy's a hell of a player, even to you? Like,
Yeah,
no.
well, Bure was a good example. Took Bure elbowing Shane Churla and sending him to Pluto
For him to like
for
him.
Don to like him, but he did like Bure after that. And he had guys that he actually had Europeans on his Boston Bruins, Matty Hagman, and I'm trying to think who else played for him.
Well,
Was
this
it
is
Rosie
right up
I
RA's
was gonna say,
alley.
there weren't too many Euros
No,
back late 70s. I mean,
no.
I know that. I think Mats Naslund, he was already gone by then, Cherry, I think. There weren't a lot of Euros
Yeah,
with those late
he had
moments.
Hagman. That's the only
Okay,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm gonna-
but he had and he was very proud of Stan Jonathan. Was our First Nations hero from was a Tuscarora warrior, and so he had Don. He was just all about toughness, Ryan. Everything in his world was if you're going to look away, that the Bruins rule was you look that guy and you don't leave that eye until he leaves.
Yeah.
It was dog pack.
Intimidation.
Rules, intimidation. Yeah, and he was also he's sly like a fox in terms of. We all cherish our jobs and we all want jobs and we all, so anything that was a threat to somebody's, like when a junior hockey team loses a guy to a position player from Europe, that's not popular in that community. And Don spoke on their behalf. Don was always, a little bit of the voice for those who didn't have a voice. So,
Well,
ironically,
when he went back and coached Mississauga, I think Spezza was there. You must have been like, I don't know how this is going to go.
I believe Patrick O'Sullivan was coached by Don Cherry.
yes, he
for
was.
years.
He coached him. First, he had Spezza and Brian McGrattan was on the Ice Dogs team. And I remember the very first meeting, Grapes called everyone. I went and skated with the team. Stupid, right? But I went out and skated with the Ice Dogs, and they call the team to center ice to discuss curfew for that night. And Brian McGrattan's there, and these were Brian's days when he was a little more rambunctious. And so Don says, I say 11 o'clock curfew tonight. And don't forget, you guys, if you go out and screw up, you're not the one that's going to look bad. I'm the one that's going to look bad. Creeps. So anyway, he says 11 o'clock curfew. And Brian McGrattan, big, tall Brian's towering over Don, and he's got his gloves on the top of his stick, and he says, Grapes, 10:30? 10:30 would be okay? Don says, 10:45. Curfew's 10:45. We got ourselves a deal. And that was how it ended, the first practice. And he was worried. We were here in St. Louis when he made the decision to coach the Ice Dogs, and Don always had this feeling that people were going to come after him and, give it to him, and they loved him. He was always, because he's kind of a quiet, shy guy, he didn't realize that, out in the community, they just
That people
can't
loved
get enough
it.
of him.
Exactly.
Yeah. So everywhere he went, he was not going to be an enemy or a guy that he was going to take some slings and arrows, but
Yeah.
that kept him ready, I can tell you that.
Now, we're talking about showmanship. We're seeing a lot more of it, I think, with some of the younger players. What do you think of that? Is it so much better for the game?
Well, I was
Does it feel-
against it. I was always worried that it's not that I'm against the celly. It's just that I feel you're really flirting with inspiring the enemy, and why would you do that?
Right.
Why give them the ammunition they need? I can't tell you how many games I've seen turn on a silly celebration.
No kidding, huh?
Well, even recently, the Kuznetsov, where the Caps rallied on the goal late in the second period,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And they did the mock Kuznetsov, Devon Taves of the Islanders.
That's right, yeah.
And that turned that game.
Yeah.
They
good
were
point.
gone to sleep. Why do it? And I think it's extremely. I don't know how you feel, Ryan. But
No,
that's the risk.
I think that some of them are really cool and it's like fun. What kind of drives me nuts about the whole situation, I sound so old, but is now like every 10-year-old in these games, they score to make it 8-2 and their center ice celebration. It's like,
You're right.
it's almost like, guys, these guys are in the NHL, and the argument Keith Yandel always says to me is, you score a goal in the best league in the world, you deserve the right to celebrate however you want.
No.
Well, everyone that looks up to you and sees you doing it, they think they can do it in a blowout on a Wednesday night. So I'm touch and go with it. I think it's cool, but you don't want it to get out of hand. That's kind of where I'll leave it at.
Yeah, you do it at your peril. You are definitely flirting with some kind of a pushback. So watch that, and then I mean, we're just trying to attract. The kids are so they just see the YouTube like that lacrosse goal. Who's not going to be? Everybody's going to do the between.
You're
the
a
legs.
loser if you don't score a lacrosse goal.
Right,
now.
right.
It's like a requirement
Right,
at
and that's
the
unfortunate.
combine.
Yeah.
You have to prove that you can do it.
Hey, we talked to Pronger. He's like, anyone try that when I was out there? Puck may
break his
go in,
wrist.
but they'll never
Exactly.
do it again.
Exactly. Yeah. that's I don't know who when McDavid waltzed Morgan Riley. It was very kind of Morgan to let him finish up because 10 years ago that was going to be a
Last
broken-
ditch slash at the ear.
for sure. Kevin Bieksa said that, right? And he definitely would have got at him.
Were you at any of these games where they ever had like issues, between the benches, bench cream bars, or even in the hallways?
No, Don always pushed to move the benches on opposite sides because he said that's a recipe for disaster. But I never worked in between the benches, Paul. I was always kind of back in the studio with Grapes, and I mean the only incidents I remember Matt Cook coming at us. He was hot about something Don had said, and that was in the 2006 Stanley Cup, but it might have been later on. And he was seriously mad. And I was in between Matt Cook, who's strong, right? His arms were like
Yeah, he's a thick little guy.
thick guy, yeah. So I didn't realize that. When I grabbed his bicep, and it was like, oh my god.
What was he mad at Grapes about?
Grapes had given him a hard time about, I think, a hit from behind, like a blindside hit. He had hit. I should be able to retain this. I think he wrecked Lecavalier's shoulder. I think he ran him from behind, and Don called him on a cheap shot, right? Being a rat. And so Cook was upset about it, and I remember things like that happened not too often, but that was one. We had Claude Lemieux after Claude Lemieux, the World Cup '96, which the Americans rallied, and won 5-2 with a couple of he was great, and Brett Hull was
In
the
Montreal,
whole team was great. Yeah, they were a great team, power forward built team, right?
Yep.
Garens and Kachucks and so forth. Anyway, Claude Lemieux kind of blew the game he was the right winger down in the left wing corner, and he fired the puck around the net to the right point, which is where he would have been. So Grapes, went on at the end of the telecast. He didn't like Lemieux either because Lemieux had hurt Neely and a couple other things. So he just ripped him a new, and then the next morning we go into the lounge, Air Canada lounge, to fly home to Toronto, and who's in the lounge? Ron, Don, Claude Lemieux, the only guy that's in the lounge. So there was a few of those moments along the way where he had to face.
But to do that, you got to face the music, and he had no problem. I mean, listen, if I say it on the air, I'll say it to your face.
Oh, he would, like Donald Brashear came in hot one night, and Grapes, I'm standing here. What are you going to do about it? And Donald says, well, it's terrible what you did. Well, I'm right here. What are you going to do about it? And then Brashear, he starts leaving the room, and so you're going to run. Yeah. You're going to run just like you run on Marty, huh? Let's go. Come on. This is freaking Don Cherry.
He flipped the script.
He knows in the back of his head that who wants to be known as punching out a 70-year-old guy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He's... Oh,
Probably got a bulletproof vest underneath those suits.
So many of those moments.
I want to go back to the reffing for a second. I'm sure you're sympathetic to it. Because of the technology and we see the replays in slow-mo 100 times, do you think the referees in the NHL today get way too much grief, or is it appropriate?
Well, it's going to be interesting even going into these playoffs. How do they call, I said to you, I kind of got unglued with the 06 crackdown that I thought was too much. It's such a challenge to get it right. I think, the whole Vegas San Jose thing last year, the mistake that was made on the 5-minute major to Cody Eakin, I just think we have to live with that stuff. I don't know why I think that, but for me as a referee, it was all part of the lessons. It's an awful thing to have a team knocked out of the playoffs on a bad call.
Especially when you got money on them.
Yeah, there's money on it, and I think now the gambling is going to continually escalate our interest, and it's going to be a revenue stream for sure. So I suppose it's got to be, the saying is, let's get it right. But I think the righteousness about sport is actually virtue, not wins and losses and goals and assists.
That's interesting.
The real essence of sport is how do you face the battle?
Just live with it.
The warrior respects the battle, doesn't care about the outcome.
I mean, you're probably familiar with Don Dankage, the 85 World Series. I mean,
Yes.
he basically, this city here lost the World Series because of a bump call he made. Yeah. And he actually got a painting of it made, and he kept it in his living room just to kind of remind him that he's human and that we're all frailty.
Another example like that, Admiral, is the World Cup of Soccer in 06. Pele not Pele.
Oh,
Zizou.
the arm goal.
No, this is
Zinedine Zidane when he
right.
headbutted the guy.
That's right, the Manchurian headbutt.
Oh my God! One of the dumbest plays you've ever seen. He just lost his mind.
Took himself out of the game. But what did he get when he went home to Paris? He got a hero's welcome.
Exactly. And
So-
they lost that game.
They
too,
lost
right?
to the Italians, right? Because of that. You
Yep.
take your Gretzky out of the lineup. It's that was that. It was over for them. But in a way, the people who understood what had happened were forgiving of the loss. They were more interested in honor than victory.
And I think the guy had said something in his ear that
Yes.
was inappropriate.
Oh,
What
absolutely.
was
Said
His
something about
mother's
his
mother.
sister or mother.
Yeah,
something
one of his family.
like bad stuff that just made him
What a
made him
coward.
snap. As somebody who's so involved in the game of hockey and forming relationships with players, now granted you're in the studio, but still, guys going through. Has it been weird for you to see how, as the game's gotten younger, there are no 36, 37-year-old veterans? There's far from a lot of them that are in the game a long time and become characters in the league. Because a lot of times, 30 years old, you're kind of running towards the end of the career now.
P.A. Parento, just a kind of a good career, nothing sensational, but he said 27 is the new 32.
Yep.
At 27 you're done unless you're really good.
John
Back,
Carlson.
I think of 29 years old. I look at like guys signing at 29. I'm like, back nine. You're on the
Yeah.
back nine at 29. And it's like, you look at the special guys. Zdeno Chara playing at 40 in the NHL is crazy to me.
Well, the Norris trophies that Lidstrom won 7 of them, all after the age of 31.
Yep.
And Doug Harvey won 7 of them, all after the age of 31. Bobby Orr, of course, won 8, and he didn't get to 28. But
Well, and Giordano won it last year.
Yes.
He was
36.
I believe he was the second oldest player to ever win the Norris Trophy.
Really?
Or maybe my
think
stats
you
are
made
on
that
here,
up.
Ron. I also
I-
thought
you got me
Austin
on that.
Matthews was on his entry-level contract.
Oh,
this
it's
year.
okay.
My
Yeah.
brain's starting to click
Yeah, but
out
he
after-
said 11 interviews. You end up kind of
Oh,
going a
you're-
little squirrely.
totally entitled to go squirrely, and that's what Pink Whitney's for.
Yeah, exactly.
My guys
Exactly.
love it, by the way, Ryan. I play beer league hockey on Wednesday nights, and they all have season seats at Buffalo, and you can get it there. It's harder to get in Ontario for us.
Soon,
LCBO
within the next couple
April.
of weeks.
Oh, good to hear. They'll be over the moon. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's like they're smuggling,
Yeah.
illicit drugs when they bring the Pink Whitney
Someone
back.
said they had to pay like $1,100 on $2,200 worth coming over the border today, which
Yes.
it's obscene doing
Yeah.
that. But
So-
thanks for the support.
It's nice to see. And the guys just love it.
We actually put something in it that makes it addictive, so that's why we
Yeah.
keep selling so much of
We
it.
had nicotine in our vodka.
When we were in Welland, Paul's hometown, they drink OV, as Old Vienna is a beer that, for whatever reason, has become the cultural beer of Welland. They love to drink OV, and the saying is you can't spell love without OV. So,
that explains biz.
yeah, that's right.
We've taken so much of your time. We appreciate it. But a guy I've been close with ever since I played together with him was Colby Armstrong. And you've gotten to really know him with his works. What do you think about that guy? And I think he's kind of added a ton of energy to the broadcast.
Yeah, he's a genius. I used to love Ryan when he was with Toronto and he had his ankle injury, and we were doing the Battle of the Blades. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Maybe your American viewer or listener might not know. It's a figure skater and a hockey player tandem. They get together and do Dancing with the Stars on Ice. So Colby was supposed to compete in it this year. He used to be rehabbing his ankle with the Leafs and would watch us do this Battle of the Blades series, and I could tell he was always keenly interested.
He
in
figure skated growing up
Yes,
when he was
his
really
mother
young.
was a coach, right?
His mother's a skating coach.
Yeah, Rosie, and so he knows his stuff. He came on our Battle of the Blades this year as a judge and just blew our minds. Like, he had technical. We call that stroking. He would
Well,
say.
he was supposed to compete, but then he
That's
pulled
right.
his hamstring.
Tore his hamstring or something. Yeah,
Yeah, that was ugly looking.
He's great for the broadcast, Ryan. He's a Red Deer Rebel where I grew up. He won the Memorial Cup with my hometown junior hockey squad, and always a great leader.
Yeah.
Funny. You could ask him about snowbanks, and he and I went to a bar in Moncton one time called Plan B, and I don't know how I ended up in a snowbank.
Before
Plan B.
What a name of a bar.
Yeah, great spot. Only original music, and Colby and I had a fun night there, among many.
Oh, and let's talk about that infamous photo of when you got your shirt off
Yeah.
dancing on the bar. That was in Victoria, I believe.
The Social. There was it's now called the Social, the bar.
Jeremy Petzing.
Is that who has the bar?
He owned it. Now he owns the local there.
The local, right. That's right. It's now the local. So, yeah, that was, as you know, the Courtnall Golf event. And the song was Laughing My Effing Ass Off. And for whatever reason, we thought we would do, Moves Like Jagger to that song. We were on the wrong song. It was Justin Courtnall. Sorry, Justin, to throw you under the bus, but I do that. Anyway, we were decided we would get up on the bar. And a lot of people did, but I should have known. I can't, not with that many cameras. But no,
You knew somebody. No, but
it's a
in the
party
end-
trick. It didn't really go too far off the rails.
What do you mean? It was awesome. It kind of went viral there. For
Oh
a
yeah,
bit.
it did. Yeah, I remember the CBC, phoning Ron. Have you seen the picture? It's like, yes. I've seen
You're like,
the
yeah,
picture.
it's my screensaver.
Yeah, that's right.
Looks amazing. It's just like that referee. I got the mural put in my living room so I can stare at it and know that we're all human once in a while.
How do you know the owner of the local? How did you know?
Well, I actually purchased a home in Victoria. I met some friends out there, and I love it. I'm probably, once I retire, that's going to be my
beautiful.
summer home. And
Yeah.
VGC golf course, it's
Yes.
unbelievable. And through Callahan O'Connor, one of my buddies, he introduced me to Jeremy Petzing, and there's a ton of hockey players that are from there. The Ben boys,
Yeah.
of course, Tyson Barrie, and just really the community, Oak Bay. It's just so beautiful and quaint. And I mean, I hate to say it, it's a lot of places in Canada now, like, you go outside, like, I want to say hi to my neighbors. I want to walk down the street with, say my dog or my girlfriend or my wife. I almost gave RA a heart attack. But, I want it to feel like, Canada a little bit. Sometimes
Yeah.
I feel like we're losing that, and everyone's not as social anymore. And I fell in love with it there. So great people, and I'm sure it's a good time.
Oh, I love it. I just had a ball. Courtnall's are, dear friends, so we have Matthews will come up on our broadcast tonight. He's not playing in the
He
All-Star.
told us he's going to be with you.
So he's obviously Lawton, Russ's son, and Austin trained together, and Matthews has been to Victoria a million times, and so I kind of got all the lowdown. Boris Doroshenko, right, was one of the skating coaches for Austin and
well,
Lawton.
I think this story has been told on our podcast. So you mentioned Courtnall and how big of pranksters they are.
Yeah.
That was so Callahan O'Connor, his father, he owned a nice boat and he had it right in the marina. So he called, or had somebody call their house while they were having a nice dinner party and say, "Hey, Mr. O'Connor, your boat is sinking in the marina right now. There must have been some hole in it, and it's going under." So Benj O'Connor, puts his jacket on, he drives down there, and Courtnall ended up walking in the house as soon as he left, and he said, let's let him sweat it out a little bit.
Yeah.
So those are the types of pranks that Courtnalls are playing, and it's such a tight-knit community.
That's great.
I just have one more. I know we talked about Don and his military stuff. You come from a military family
Yes.
as well. Now, you were actually born in West Germany, correct?
Yeah, Zweibrücken. So that was a kind of a fluke because I was breech. You know what that is? Upside. I don't know,
Yeah.
but it's upside down or backwards in the womb or something. And anyway, Mom was in 48 hours of labor, and they were worried, so they took her to the Better Hospital in Zweibrücken. We were actually living in Metz, France. Dad was stationed there, and yeah, up and till I was 12, we were all over the country as a military brat, and
Right.
loved that upbringing. Lived in Yukon, in northern Canada, also in Nova Scotia, Victoria for a year.
You've been
and a half.
everywhere.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a good, for me again, like refereeing was a good to kind of teach you we're all the same, right?
Right.
So I was very grateful for that upbringing, and the only thing about it is for your hockey, it's a test because you're moving away from a team. You just finally make a team, and then you got to go try and establish yourself again. And once you hit Pee Wee, I meant to ask you, Ryan. You played in the Quebec Pee Wee tournament, right?
Yeah,
Did you Paul,
yeah.
play in it?
I didn't. Whit will let you know. He usually talks about it every episode.
Yeah,
Did you win
I
the
won
MVP
it. We
or
won
something?
it. We won
No
it.
way.
Yeah, we won it in
wouldn't say.
overtime. We beat the Richmond Hill Stars in overtime.
Great.
Yeah, it was the coolest memory. I mean, at that time, he was on ESPN2, and you think back to being 10 years old, and you're already talking about going to Quebec. I think 12 or 13 year, and then first you got to get into there, and then we get in, and we ended up winning it. So that memory is like maybe one of my top hockey memories, being on the ice with your dad and all that stuff.
We're going for Rogers Hometown Hockey is there, and Eric Lindros has been invited there. So that's how things can come around, right? Eric, of course,
Yeah.
didn't want to go to play for Marcelo Bou. Was he right about that? And anyway, he's going to be a guest I don't think we'll get him on the Sunday broadcast. Tara Sloan, my colleague on Hometown Hockey, will probably interview him on the Saturday. But how cool that Eric is going in as a guest of the Quebec Pee Wee tournament.
Would you attribute your appreciation for Canada and every place because the fact that you were able to move around and see every different place?
I think Paul, if I honestly, I actually go away from nationalism because of moving around a lot. I think everybody in Alberta is so proud of Alberta and hates BCers, and I'm generalizing. I don't mean to start a war here,
Yeah,
but people are so proud.
Quebec and out west are not exactly getting along right now.
That's right. So you have all these regional fights or feuds and fiefdoms, and it's silly. When you go to all those places, everyone's lovely and everything's great, and so you kind of learn to strip away the flag waving a little bit because of that military upbringing. And That's what I got out of it.
It sounds a lot like now, like the States. Like Canada you could kind of think of one whole Canada, but it seems like it's getting fractured a little bit more like we are down here.
We were always, and now our little other big thing is we have First Nations that we never really resolved our issue with.
Right.
We kind of came in,
same here.
took the land, and we like it.
Same
We'll
boat
take
here.
it. That we're figuring that out slowly but surely. But I mean, it's both countries are just we're fantastic neighbors and fantastic places. I just was driven over here. I couldn't find the Ritz. My driver who just moved
Not
to
bad,
America.
not bad, Ronnie?
Yeah. You're ever since Serge Ibaka, right? You're now living like the other half lives.
Oh, come on.
That was great.
Thank you.
It was such a great thing. And what did you enjoy, Bianca or
Penny? One thing about Penny is her personality didn't show on camera.
No, she's so shy.
She's very shy and very polite, and when cameras were off rolling, all of them. That Bo Bichette is a stud as well.
Yeah.
But Serge, just such a good, especially the multiculturalism in Canada, for him to be one of the faces of the Toronto Raptors and how open he is about doing, videos and showing his personality. It was a cool little thing. And Ron, when I got the call, I was like, well, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, who? Like those people? Me? What? I was like, you guys are aware that like people are going to rip me apart at the fact that I got the nod for this, but it was because somebody had backed out. But I was very fortunate to experience that and meet those people.
Yeah, but you need somebody to kind of throw the little bit of levity here or a little bit of leadership here.
Yeah.
So you have some experience with that, right, Paul? So it was perfect. It made it.
Well,
it was great.
Ron, listen, to come on with us is great, and I think people love hockey so much, but it would be different if they didn't have people like you, the way you guys present the game and present the product. So it's nothing without the entertainment aspect. And Hockey Night in Canada, for me, the broadcast has always been so exceptional, and the little videos with music they play before playoff series, you know what I mean?
My
Those
God.
things have legit brought me to tears. It's like it makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. You've done it for so long, so thank you, and thanks for joining our podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys.
And last thing I'll say is I hope things are able to be patched up between you and Don, and hopefully if that happens, we'd love to have you guys on and maybe talk about some stuff.
Biz, how many ads do yourself?
Ron, he just rip on Ron the whole time.
Don just sits there. When we got him on together, I do the storytelling, right? And Don just sits and preens at how funny he was. Gotta love him for that.
Tell him this one. Tell him this one.
Love it.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed that interview. And once again, thank you to Can-I Brands for their support of the Spittin Chiclets podcast and the ECHL Player Relief Fund. Make sure to check out canibrands.com and enter promo code BIZ30 for 30% off all products site-wide. And as mentioned on previous interviews, if you guys want to head to the ECHL website and or social channels, there's a GoFundMe set up for the Player Relief Fund, and we wish them and all of you the best.